Anu, hun, what were we doing? What were we doing? So obviously, Anu from the latest season of Love is Blind UK's main match was Patrick. And I think there were differences. There was clear differences in the beginning, perhaps differences that they could make work, but ultimately I felt like the differences between them weren't going to work. And I think the main difference was spirituality. Anu, she's seems to be Christian, heavily Christian. She prays. When she wakes up in the morning, she prays with her family, very much giving prayer warrior. Whereas Patrick is more on the spiritual side, perhaps believes in God or a higher energy, but is not necessarily religious. And I feel like when the topic of religion and spirituality was brought up, he kind of skirted past the fact that he's not a Christian. And I feel like Anu kind of skirted past that as well. And I feel like some people do skirt past that, like, they might not be a Christian, but if they believe in God, that's good enough. And then we can navigate from there, right? We can navigate and negotiate from there. But I just kind of feel like if you know that you're a proper Christian prayer warrior babe, what did they say? They were not equally yoked. I think that's the terminology. They weren't equally yoked. So that was already telling me it weren't going to be a match. But communication styles, I think their values also were a mismatch in terms of, like I said, Anu, very traditional Christian, Nigerian, African babe, probably follows what her parents say most of the time. She probably, lives for her parents' approval. Whilst Patrick is his own person. He lives for himself. He doesn't really live for other people's validation. And he doesn't really care necessarily about... He is half African, he's half Nigerian, but he doesn't necessarily care about African traditional values like getting approval, things like that, right? In terms of marriage. He doesn't really care about the whole approval situation. And obviously, in traditional African marriage, the parents' approval is a very big thing. Oftentimes, or not, like, if you don't get your parents' approval, like, they won't show up to your wedding. Like, it's that deep. And therefore, like, for a lot of African women, it's, like, very important to get the parents' approval. So Patrick has made it very clear that he sees that as a negative thing, that she subscribes to that mentality. To the point where he kind of just insults her and calls her a people pleaser and a follower. Basically says she doesn't have a mind of her own. Now, I don't actually disagree. But I feel like time and place and also delivery, and some things don't need to be said. And it's just kind of like, as a man, especially as an African man, like, you can get away with things that an African woman can't get away with. Like, for instance, I don't want a traditional marriage, and my parents have already given me wahala about that. But they were basically like, if my brother didn't have a traditional marriage, it wouldn't be a problem. But for me, I can see why, because if I was to do a traditional African marriage, my bride price would definitely be up there. But they're gonna have to figure out another way. Maybe I might cut a deal. If you ever see me having a traditional African marriage, just know I was offered something I couldn't refuse. So yeah, for the woman to, like, refuse African tradition, especially when it comes to marriage, is very difficult. There's definitely higher expectations for African women than African men when it comes to marriage. Even though I agree with what Patrick is saying, I definitely feel like there's nuances which he should have been a bit more mindful of. Yeah, as I was saying, their values differ. And I feel like if he's on this frequency where he's not living for other people's approval, now when it comes back to religion, that's going to be a cause of contention as well. Because she was talking about, would you mind if we waited till marriage? And he was basically like, what's your opinions on that? And he was basically like, I personally don't have this thing where I need to wait till marriage. But if that was something that you wanted to do, I would be on board to wait. So again, I feel like the values were definitely mismatched. And that was very obvious from both sides. Patrick's spleen is ringing now, telling him this is not your woman. I think if her spleen... If she could feel the intuition from her spleen, I think it would be saying the same thing. But to me, it was giving she was desperate to get married. So she was willing to make this relationship work. And it was given desperate because I don't know what redeeming qualities Patrick really had other than being someone to marry. He says that he's a life coach. I don't know how successful he is at being a life coach slash human body coach. Was he really giving husband material? I don't know. Personally, I don't think so. The vibes were definitely down bad by the end of it. But Annie's trying to hold on. Obviously, she's a singer. Patrick's been asking her to sing this whole time. She's been not been singing. And now she's trying to sing to try and save the relationship at the end. And he's basically like, you don't need to sing for me, baby, because it's not working out. And she starts crying. She's really upset. And she was basically like, I thought that, he was going to be my person in here and we were going to make it to marriage. And I know these London streets are rough out here, but you're only 31, hon. It's not that deep. Just hold on, hon. Hold on a bit longer because Aanu trying to make it work with Patrick was ridiculous. This is where desperation is taking us. Then we see in the trailer, she's going off on Patrick. She's calling him a liar. So now I'm confused. What did Patrick lie about? Because it seemed like he was very honest in the post. I'm like, what did he lie about? I want to know the tea. But for me, it's just giving very much. This is a bit embarrassing, Kiel. This is just embarrassing. It's just very much like, let's just take the L, hon. Let's just take the L. But yeah, I got to hear from you guys. Can you see why Annie was trying to make it work? Or do you feel like it was just a bit of desperation here? And what do you think of Patrick? I got to hear from you guys.